with this program, you are able to reach zero. So we have members who have actually reached sort of a 0 kroner monthly premium, which is of course sort of, it makes them almost even more incentivized to talk about it, because then they are so thrilled that they managed to get all the way down to 0.
Hey, welcome to this week's episode of Homescreen. On today's episode, I'm going to be chatting to Alex, who is the head of product over at Hedvig in Sweden. This is a disruptive insurance play, which is looking to take control of the design interface of those claiming for house insurance issues in Sweden, but they've also recently just moved into Norway. So they're offering sort of travel and house services over in Norway as well. So a company that's growing really fast. I'm going to take a look at a few of the mechanisms that are allowing them to grow fast. First, there's going to be an onboarding flow, which will show us how to sign up for the service. They've got this really neat little chat interface to do that. We're going to then take a look at how they do referrals, so how they get their friends onto the platform, what incentives are in place to make that work. And then we're going to take a look at their claiming mechanisms, so how they can actually claim on the insurance policies that they've made. Can you start off by telling me a little bit about yourself and how you got involved with Hedvig?
Absolutely. So yeah, I'm Alex. I joined Hedvig about 2 years ago, and I lead product and product design at Hedvig. Prior to that, I spent a few years at another Swedish fintech called iSettle, and I actually joined iSettle in London and worked there for about a year or so. And then I made the switch into product development roughly around the same time that iSettle decided to go from sort of being a single product company doing only card payments to becoming a multi-product company, sort of serving multiple needs of small businesses. I spent a couple of years leading different product teams, such as the iSettle Capital team, which extends financing to small business owners. And then they repay it as a percentage of their future card sales with iSettle. So yeah, there I sort of I got sort of to hands-on build and scale products, and iSettle taught me a lot of great lessons around sort of the value of really having a really strong UX UI as part of all sides or all parts of the product, starting from the onboarding all through to sort of any small interaction. So I think I sort of saw Hedvig as this new wave of disruption within fintech. Sort of the banks had been challenged for a few years, but the insurance companies had been untouched. So very excited to sort of spearhead that disruption together with Hedvig, and creating a new generation of sort of experiences within insurance.
Yeah. Was there anything in that experience that you taught you about sort of the way that design operates from a hardware perspective or from a physical perspective? And I guess there's maybe not been so much opportunity to do that sort of thing at Hedvig.
Yeah, I definitely, that was a huge part of iSettle, and I would say maybe initially that was the main kind of innovation at iSettle, that all of a sudden anyone could have a piece of hardware to collect card payments, and that was before you had these peer-to-peer payments services. So now in Sweden you have Swedish, in the UK obviously all the neobanks can do peer-to-peer transactions, but when iSettle launched, you actually you could plug in your small card reader to your phone, and when you were splitting the dinner bill, you could do it with card.
Did you ever do that? Did you ever just bring a card reader with you to dinner or something?
Yeah, I mean, more as a novelty, but yeah, people did use it like that.
Wow. Cool.
So that was interesting, but I think with hardware is hard. It can easily takes 6 months from having the final blueprints and designs to getting the working piece of hardware in your hand, and 6 months is a long time in the world for companies like Hedvig. Yeah. So for iSettle, obviously that was such a critical piece of the puzzle, and we've definitely discussed it and ideated quite a bit on that at Hedvig as well, but we don't see it as sort of, it's not a key enabler to provide the product or the service. So maybe in the future, but it takes a lot of effort to do it well.
What does that sort of product process look like for you guys, and how do you sort of ensure that you're continuously delivering new features?
I would say we constantly have our ears to the ground in terms of what are people asking for and what functionality do they demand and ask for from Hedvig, but also sort of opportunity seeking from our perspective. Where do we want to take the business? How do we want to expand? And insurance is it's a very complex kind of industry with how the insurance products, that's like one thing. I mean, big insurance companies, product development is more around how you design the terms. But for us, we're both sort of designing an insurance company and a sort of a product company at the same time. So I would say we very much focus on keeping sort of all channels for insights open, meaning doing continuous user interviews, and also sort of synthesizing and analyzing the questions we get through our own chat and from our public channels and social media, etc., and sort of try to distill that into what demands are there actually. And then that goes into a very sort of a very rigorous planning process, and then we are very deliberate in what you choose to lift into kind of discovery and refinement, and then making sure that the things that we build are the right things at the right time, kind of. So there's lots of opportunities in the space. So for us, it's a lot about keeping focus, and that's a big part of my job, obviously, to make sure that we don't get too thinly spread out on too many opportunities at the same time, but really make sure that we're building towards what we want to become.
What is the main product experience you're trying to convey with Hedvig?
Yeah, so I think that is definitely where the trends are going within insurtech. For Hedvig, that means our mission is to make millions of minds more peaceful through remarkably nice services. So we try to lift out insurance from that equation as much as possible, because what insurance is actually this feeling, this sense of peace of mind that when something might happen in the future, it will be okay, it will be fine, and I will be taken care of. And that sort of sense of peace of mind doesn't necessarily come from a sort of a rigorous insurance terms document, for example, but it can come as much from a neatly designed user flow, or sort of some innovative aspect in terms of something simple in like how we do communication, or how we keep you informed on certain things. So we definitely view ourselves much more as a service company, and marrying the digital experience with sort of a world-class service team that sits at our offices, and making sure that we don't just sort of design a product which is sort of pays out money quickly, but rather making sure that we design a product which gives people true peace of mind and solves their problems, not just puts money in their bank account. So I think taking that wider stance also makes us feel more kind of humane and less sort of an enemy when you need to get in touch with us, and more as an ally that like together we will help solve your problem. And I think that's a very nice shift that is happening, and a good position to be in for us, I think.
Have you noticed a shift in the traditional way of insurers, sort of the way that they're speaking? Are they reacting to this environment in a particular way, do you think? And also, kind of, what's the response been like in Sweden? I guess you guys are based in Stockholm. So have you guys sort of seen a spike in sort of insurance claims in that sort of recent times, or anything like that?
I can't speak too much on behalf of what other insurance companies are doing, but looking back at previous economic financial crisis, the insurance industry as a whole quite often remains fairly sort of unharmed in terms of sort of growth. It might stagnate slightly, but it's not that affected. I think insurance is one of those kind of life services that are very sort of a basic need. So it's rather something that you that you feel even more sort of something that you really need to look after when these times. So for us, that actually means that during this pandemic, we expanded and we launched in Norway. So we expanded to our first market outside of Sweden, and we've sort of had multiple record days in terms of signing new users. So I think it might mean that people feel they have a sort of a stronger need for feeling safe. It makes it even more important for Hedvig to sort of convey a sense of being a safe player and being an established player. We've been around for about 2 years, but we are sort of a fully fledged sort of insurance provider. So just like conveying that in a clear way has actually been working sort of to our benefit kind of during these times. And then I definitely see sort of the results of this pandemic is yet to be seen. And I think it's too early to say how it will affect people long term. I think we haven't really started seeing the effects it will have on the economy truly. Obviously some employment rates and such are spiking, but furloughing, things like that, when people who think they have a job to go back to might not have. But that's to be seen how that plays out.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned there that you're an insurance provider. What does that legally mean for you guys in terms of the offering, like the product offering that you have?
Yeah, so we act as an MGA. So we have a reinsurance partner, but we own the full end user experience. So all interactions go through us, and then we have a reinsurance partner who basically provides the balance sheet and a partner to us, but nothing that the end user needs to think too much about.
Okay, so it's one partner, and then you provide the interface through which that happens.
Exactly.
Interesting. We've seen sort of a few approaches. One, which is which I think you've called there an MGA, which is would that typically just be one interface provider and one insurer? And then we also have brokers who will be one interface provider and then a range of different insurers, but maybe less control over some of the other. I guess you've got quite a privileged position in the fact that you work with one provider. This gives you the freedom to fully control the flow. Was that the thinking behind taking that approach?
Yeah, I think as you mentioned, you can do it in a few different ways. For us, going with a strong, so it's one of the sort of 3 biggest reinsurance companies in the world with a balance sheet of 60 billion euros, and that enabled us to get up and running very, very quickly. And I think that there are definitely different models, and depending on sort of the products, the insurance products you want to offer. For us, being in Sweden, we have focused on sort of the base insurance products, being kind of home insurance, which 95% of the population has. There hasn't been a big need for us to work with multiple partners to offer that product, and we've been able to grow nicely with that single partner.
You spoke about the sort of the home insurance being the sort of the key area you guys are focusing on. Is that an MVP play? Is that an early stage? Are you planning to move beyond that to different types of insurance sort of products, or what's the trajectory for you guys?
Yeah, exactly. So we started out with home insurance, and as mentioned, almost everyone in Sweden has this product. Now, when we expanded into Norway, it's slightly different. So the base coverage there is kind of a home contents insurance and a travel insurance. So we already there offer multiple insurance types. So going forward, we will definitely add more products over time. Okay. But the home insurance is for sort of our target audience of sort of quite young people, mostly in cities. The home insurance covers basically you and your family, your home, your things, and when you're traveling and so on. So it is sort of the core insurance for that segment, and that has also enabled us to move quite quickly. The demand for more insurance products grows as people mature and get older and have kids and cars and houses and so over time we will definitely expand that portfolio.
Yeah, so I guess as your audience grows, then your offering will probably like scale with it. It's quite a neat way of looking at that. Without further ado, I guess the thing we should probably do is start with one of the journeys. So looking here at, so this is the Hedvig onboarding experience. It starts off with a chat interface, and then this bot's gonna, I would imagine it's a chat bot, right? Is gonna sort of give us a nice introductory spiel, say hello to us, get us to answer with a series of canned responses, and then we can sort of nicely mix up our different data entry points and get the sort of get our information filled in quite quickly. Was the thinking there in terms of like using this sort of like chat style feed?
So I think early on, when this was first designed, a chat interface for an onboarding was quite a novel thing.
Yeah.
2.5 years ago. But obviously, a lot of startups, especially, have adopted that since. But for us, we really wanted to make it feel like you are starting the conversation with Hedvig already in the onboarding, because Hedvig will be your interface for when you have a question as a signed member and when you have a claim with Hedvig. So by lifting that experience already into the onboarding, which for a product like ours is a very key kind of user journey in itself. In Sweden, you usually stick with your insurance company for an average of 10 years, so you don't have a purchase experience very often. So by already in the onboarding providing a very strong user experience, we also give the user a sense of what it will be like to have Hedvig in the future. And the way we designed it was basically sort of starting out with the questions needed for producing a price quote, but then sort of adding in this layer of sort of a conversational smooth feeling that you're having a conversation with Hedvig. So there are some questions that are just there to sort of have the flow of the conversation going, and then we use that, as you saw there previously, to produce a price quote, and then you sign that with bank ID, and you can continue through sort of post sign, but still part of the onboarding to set up payments and notifications and such.
And this is so I guess the scenario here is you're saying here that you've got a policy through ICA, and then you will, I would imagine here, aggregate through this platform here, Trustly, and that'll give you access to the transaction data. Is that right? Or maybe the account data, and then what I would guess is that Hedvig will then allow you will then move over that insurance policy for you from that previous policy over to their bespoke policy, or allow you to do that. Is that the purpose there?
Yeah, those are actually separate. So in the chat onboarding, if you choose to have a previous insurance company, we will then handle the switch from your previous insurance company in a fully automated way. And then when we ask in the post sign part of the onboarding, when you connect to Trustly, that's just to connect your bank account, actually, so that we can withdraw the monthly payments, but also have enable instant payouts for future claims. Right.
Okay. And Trustly, not too familiar with them. Are they operating mainly in your market?
Yeah. They're a Swedish company as well. So they started out here, but they operate in more European markets as well. But for us, it was really about sort of what's the smoothest experience for payments in this market. So I think payments is one of those things that we will sort of localize to make sure that sort of the user experience has the same level of maintains the same high level across markets, and that might mean different payment providers in different markets.
Okay, that makes sense. And so we have, as part of the Payment Services Directive, which is spreading out across Europe, there is my understanding is that there is a few different approaches to how that information can be accessed. So like account initiation services, so to read transaction data, and then payment initiation services. So to be able to generate payments. I would guess this is the latter that they're doing for you guys, right? Are they generating payments for you?
Sort of. So with the Trustly specifically, it's a direct debit. So they built a direct debit setup. So they actually, when you connect with Trustly in their interface, then you actually agree to sign a direct debit mandate. So for us to be able to withdraw and pay out to that bank account. But we have definitely looked into account aggregators and payment initiating services that could help us make that even smoother, because I think it's for us mostly about sort of what for a given market, what will be a nice experience for the end user. And some payment providers can cover multiple markets, and in some cases we need to localize that a bit. But more so on the payment initiation than on account aggregation.
Got you. And just for those that viewers that might not be affiliated with the Scandinavian market, we saw an interface there from Bank ID as well, which is quite a unique proposition in kind of the world of sort of financial data. Specifically, Bank ID is a platform which is specific to Sweden and Denmark and all of those different countries, would you say? And what is it linked to your personal ID within the country?
Exactly. So Bank ID is kind of Bank ID specifically is a Swedish kind of innovation, which is collaboration between the big banks. So it acts as your digital identity card, and you can use that to most services which require something more than just email and password in Sweden have Bank ID as the authorizing kind of service. And what that does is it provides this extra layer of sort of safety and when bank applications and insurance applications and similar often use Bank ID as a means of authorizing and authenticating the person. And it's a similar setup in Norway with the Norwegian Bank ID, and slightly different sort of interface, but works in a similar way. So it actually, if you sign with Bank ID, it's as if you were to sort of present your identity card and sign with your signature. So it's as strong in terms of authorization.
Yes, yeah, and that's quite unique in the sense of we don't have anything like that here in the UK, for example. We don't really have anything like that in the rest of Europe. I believe, or at least to that level of sort of access that it provides. But sort of this is sort of like the other interesting notion, which is that personal number idea as well, which is I think linked to that, which is that in Sweden you guys have personal ID numbers that do quite interesting things, right? You can do you can instantly, like, so for example, in that journey, we actually saw the personal ID being used to identify certain characteristics about where you lived and kind of what you did and that sort of thing. What's involved in that sort of personal ID? What's held within that data?
So what the personal ID is simply, it's your date of birth plus 4 digits at the end. And what it acts as is sort of your universal identifier across everything that happens in Sweden. So all sort of public records, all private records, all companies that you sign up with can actually use your personal number as the common identifier. So what we can do with your personal number is actually automatically fetch certain information, for example, your address, to simplify the onboarding flow. And for houses, so we have home insurance for apartments, but also for houses. And for houses, we can have another provider who fetches sort of the size of the house and the building year and things like that. So it acts as an identifier, and different databases can then be used to sort of create a fuller picture of the person that you're interfacing with.
And was there quite a lot of effort involved in sort of like having that sort of data point retrieve information from databases? Does it take a lot of effort for you guys to pull that information, or is it quite simple?
It's quite simple. So in Sweden, it's such widespread kind of means of identification, and there's a lot of within. And Sweden is one of the sort of highest, like it's like a big credit market. So there's a lot of like personal loans, like kind of services in Sweden, and they've kind of push that development, I think, a lot to make it so that you can get an instant, for example, credit report on anyone by just using the personal number.
In terms of like the experience of maybe saying to Hedvig, look, I've already got an insurance provider for now, I'm not looking to switch, but keep me in mind, sort of thing, which is, I guess, kind of what we've seen to a certain extent within that experience there. What was the thinking behind that sort of like allowing that level of flexibility within the onboarding flow?
That's definitely something that does happen. I mean, people shop around a bit. They might have heard of Hedvig and want to just see, okay, what's the experience like and what will it cost me? Because it's hard to completely move away from people wanting to compare insurances on price and coverage.
Yeah.
So that can definitely happen. And then if you've signed up through the app, then we hold that quote for a number of for a certain amount of time, and so you can basically revisit your quote, and you can go back to the chat and ask questions to Hedvig about the service or about your quote or whatever it might be. And then we also sort of ping the user with a reminder a while after they've attempted to sign up, just to see if they have any questions or if there's anything else we can have. So we don't feel like we have to close them right then and there, but rather it's better to have someone sort of try it out and see what it's like, and then sort of maintain a good relationship for when they in the future decide to make the switch.
Second up, and this is, I guess, another route back into the product, which maybe the scenario maybe potentially someone's not taken up a quote, or maybe they're hearing about it through someone else. You've got a really nifty sort of mechanism for getting people to sort of refer others and also to get into the funnel. So we're going to take a look at that, Jenny. First off, this really neat little block which tells us our route towards a lower price. So we've got a really simple sort of sharing mechanism there, and then we can share via all the usual sort of like sharing mechanisms on iOS's sort of like I guess UI elements, and then straight back into Hedvig, into this chat interface that we took a look at before. And I guess a very similar format there.
Yeah.
So, and then invites, we've got one person there which we've tracked. We've got a few others there who we can see that have picked up the service, and some that we're waiting for. It's really interesting that you can see what stage they're at. You can sort of like essentially nudge your friends through the onboarding flow and say like, come on man, why haven't you done this? And that sort of thing. From your perspective, it's I bring the cost of my my insurance package down by bringing new people onto the platform. And from their perspective, it's I get. Do they get anything as well involved in that?
It's a mutual 10 kroner discount on the monthly premium for both parties.
Got you. And then, as we've said there, the interesting notion there is this sort of like behavioral sort of thing, which is I can see what my friends are doing with the onboarding flow there. I can see who's done it and who hasn't. And I can therefore say, where's my next 10 krona going to come from? Insert name of friend. What was the thinking behind that as a mechanism? Obviously, I'd imagine there's a lot of cost involved in things like that, and there's a potential to burn through cash when you're building referral mechanisms like this.
So to start off, I would say when we started discussing having a referral program, it's something that we early on felt was going to had the potential to be a strong growth driver for Hedvig. Because insurance is not something that you generally sit around with your friends at a dinner or over and after work and talk about. So, but we saw that when when people had a strong experience with Hedvig, then they wanted to share that. So we did see early on that word of mouth was a key channel for us.
Yeah.
So we did a short kind of experiment with a more transactional kind of referrals program, which was just a one-off fee. But we quickly realized that Hedvig is, since it's this sort of it's a service or a product that you don't use very frequently, and then it's also in Hedvig we very much innovate both on the user experience and the interaction you have with Hedvig, but also on the business model. So we take a fixed fee of your monthly premium to cover our operations. Then the rest is held in a claims pool, so we can enable instant payouts. And if there's anything left in the claims pool towards the end of the year, it goes to a charitable cause. So there is this sort of in our DNA, there is this sense of community that the more people get Hedvig, the more sort of funds will be directed towards these charitable causes. And then also all of the sort of the hard value of sort of having a simpler experience and a transparent kind of insurance. So we saw that if we can create something which is a bit talkable and something that creates this sense of community, and that became this sort of double-sided incentivized referral program, where as long when you invite someone and they sign up, then you both have this 10 kroner discount on your premium as long as you're both members. So that means that it means two things. One, that you can give your friend a gift to sort of like push them over the edge. Maybe they're considering switching or not, so it gives them that little extra nudge. With this program, you are able to reach zero. So we have members who have actually reached sort of a 0 kroner monthly premium, which is of course sort of, it makes them almost even more incentivized to talk about it, because then they are so thrilled that they managed to get all the way down to zero. And from a financial perspective, how it's structured means that basically, given that it's our own user base acting as the ambassadors or persons kind of selling Hedvig, we don't have, there's no cost of acquisition. It's just a slightly reduced average premium on those members. So and discounting that to a present value, it becomes sort of, it definitely makes sense from an economic perspective.
Yeah. I suppose I didn't think about that, in the sense that this is not necessarily an out cost. It's not a cost for you guys. It's more a reduction of a received payment, presumably.
Yeah.
In essence, so there's and you're thinking about like the lifetime value of a customer as well, like their ability to share value, share access to your platform with others. That's probably at this stage, I might be wrong in thinking this, but as valuable to you as the amount of money they're spending on the platform. You know, the amount that they can bring in and convert into real high value users. It's
definitely something that we've thought a lot about. I think one difference for us compared to say a Monzo is, with a Monzo, you sign up and you straight away you can get the card and start using Monzo. With Hedvig, you don't have the same kind of you don't get to use the product as early on, not to its full potential, at least. You don't necessarily sign up and the first thing you do is you break your phone and you make a claim. So but we see it's a very interesting channel that has very much been a proven growth channel for us. So we see potential there in doing, sort of playing around with it a bit more, and we have some ideas on how we can experiment with different maybe some kind of exclusivity model, maybe something around the sort of the incentive model. Right now it's always 10 kroners to both sides. That could also be something that we could experiment with.
The head of Monzo came on to one of our marketing shows a few weeks ago, and he was talking about the idea of like an engine of growth, in that, you know, one thing might work well for a long time, but it can slow and it can start not being as valuable to you as maybe other mechanisms. So notably, they had this engine of growth, which was like this golden ticket thing, which we're talking about there, like the scarcity model. And then they found that when it had reached its peak, then they could then move on to another channel, which for them turned out to be like tube ads and TV and that kind of thing. And that kind of like knowing when to switch is really important maybe from a product perspective and from a marketing perspective. It's how do you, at what points do you notice the thing slowing down to the extent that you need to find something else to do in a way? It's a really interesting, an interesting thing. I'd be interested to hear how people approach that problem. It's I think it's hard to quantify, because then you need to really understand sort of where, like, because I think for Monzo it was a lot about sort of that early. It was a spark for awareness in the market about the service. It made people talk, and then when awareness reaches a certain point, then I think it's done its job. So the job is not only to see how many people are coming through this channel, but it also becomes this conversation piece that you and me are talking about their golden ticket program, and spreads awareness about Monzo as a whole. So yeah, definitely both product and the marketing kind of challenge to understand when it's reached its full potential. Yeah. And for you guys, I guess, and what we can see really neatly in that video that we saw was that this is a design challenge as well. So this is about explaining to people how their impact can be conveyed in a sort of levels-based sort of way. You know, you invite one person, you move down the ladder, and so on and so forth. What was the thinking behind that as a concept? It's something you've stuck with. Why use this as your sort of your mechanism?
Yeah, so we definitely approached the program in a way where it was I think we found the mechanism of this 10 kroner mutual discount as long as both parties are members. That was like the first piece of it, and then we thought about, okay, so how can we push it to another level? And I think that bar that sort of animates down. So when you have 0, we sort of show you that you can reach all the way down. When you haven't invited anyone, we show you how you can go all the way down to 0. And then as you also noticed, that when people start onboarding, they don't complete the sign up, then you can nudge those people. So we basically try to take a look at this sort of the user journey as a whole, and thought, okay, so what are you thinking as a Hedvig member when you see this? Well, you need to convince people, and that's one thing, but you also need to feel inspired to do it. So for us, that was one piece there, was to show like you can reach 0, and then when you sort of when you've started inviting people, then of course you're not going to have 100% conversion, because that's something we work with every day to try to improve our conversion rates. But then nudging a friend is easier to do than for us to sort of nudge everyone who drops out of onboarding. So we try to sort of try to apply some of our own thinking on how we grow Hedvig into sort of how can a Hedvig user grow their own kind of referral counter.
Cool. I'm just going to race through the final journey whilst we have time. And this is probably the most important for the experience. This is the core functionality we're going to see here. This is the thing you're here for. We see the smoke signals being sort of sent there, and we can start our claim. And we've got some quick actions there. What was the purpose of these sort of like quick action tiles?
So it's kind of twofold. I would say one is it's built like a CMS, so we can actually tailor that depending on the user and the time of year and what common claims we have. So those are the most common claims that we experience basically. And the other is that it takes the very complex insurance terms and makes it accessible, and you can understand that specifically this thing, this is what I can expect. So
and now we're pushing to this chat interface. So we're familiar with this largely based on our onboarding experience. But this is, I guess, the main modus operandi from which we'll go about doing our claim. It's a conversation, if you will, that we'd usually have with an insurance clerk or something like that, or someone who's processing those claims. but this happening within the app, within this really nice sort of like, I'm not sure what the UI element's called, but essentially, you know, like this sort of interface that pops up from below. And we're able to talk to them about what we're claiming, their details about sort of the Kindle that we're trying to claim on.
Making a claim used to mean sort of lengthy phone queues, filling out long documents, etc. And we tried to design it so that it was sort of the opposite of that. So how do we make it as easy and seamless as possible? And a voice recording where you just tell us what has happened is actually a very neat way for us to collect a lot of information, because it's easier to say a lot of things in a short amount of time than trying to remember and trying to structure sort of the sentences and trying to get all the information in. Yeah. So the voice recording works very well for us. We analyze that and run some fraud checks on our side. We also convert the voice to text and use that to sort of continuously train our fraud models and internal checks. So voice, it sort of collects a lot of information in one go, and then in the background we also collect metadata to get a fuller picture of the experience. So what you see is a simple voice recording, and if we have all the information, as in the example in the recording, we can make an instant payout. And then if we're lacking some information, the chat is where we ask follow-up questions. And then on our side, there's a lot of internal sort of fraud checks and things to make sure that we have what we need to complete the claim. And here showed a very sort of simple claim, a Kindle or piece of electronics that's just quite easy to replace with just sort of a payout, and then the user can go and replace it themselves. But we also use the voice recording as a starting point for other more complex claims, such as a water leakage, or if you are injured when you're abroad, then it still starts out with a voice recording, because we do collect a lot of information in that, and then we can decide how to follow up after.
Yeah, that's interesting there. So a few questions off the back of that. The first one then is, so presumably all the decisioning's being handled from Hedvig then, in essence. You guys are handling that specifically?
Yeah.
Okay. And then there's like this, I guess, a triage, we call like a triaging, or like a taking you down different routes based on the specific type of claim that you're making. These all sound very complicated sort of things to operate, complicated decisions to make, and that sort of thing. Is there any involvement with the insurer on sort of like setting the guidelines of how you'll make a claim, and how much information is required from their perspective to make sure that you're sort of like maintaining a level of sort of like their standards, if you will?
Yeah, there's some. I mean, we need to meet some requirements, of course, to make sure that we're not paying out money recklessly. But what happens when you submit that claim, that voice recording, is we've also built our own back office system. So where our insurance experience team that handles the claims, the interface they sit in, they are then given a much richer picture of the member and the claim. So we do have that kind of, yeah. The other side of it is actually a person sitting and handling it, and we can do a lot of the checks automatically, but we still make sure that sort of it checks out before we pay out any funds.
Cool, got you. Sounds good. Nice one. So just before we finish, I wanted to just ask if there was any big plans for the rest of the year. Obviously, we're about halfway through now. There's been quite a lot of interruption in maybe a lot of businesses' plans. I'm not sure if that's the case for you guys, but any sort of big plans for the rest of the year? Have you had to revise any of your sort of previous ambitions for the year and so on?
I think we're pretty much sticking to our plans. We, as I mentioned earlier, we managed to launch our first market outside of Sweden. So we went live in Norway in April. Just last week we fully launched our new brand, which is looking really nice, and that's what you see on our website and in our social channels and in the app now. So now going forward, for the rest of the year, we have identified a couple of sort of new user journeys that we will support. So I think in a few months we will be able to see a few new sort of core user journeys in the app and in our onboardings. So that would be really exciting, and that's to continue our sort of relentless focus on providing this amazing service experience for members, and also as we continuously sort of try to grow faster and faster, there would be a lot of opportunities that we're kind of pondering, and it will be interesting to see those play out during the coming months.
Just before we clock off though, any way that people can maybe find out a little bit more about Hedvig, or maybe a bit about you? Are you on any of the social media channels, anything like that?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter, and we can use my full name perhaps in the bio later, because I have a double surname, so people can find me. But yeah, I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter, so you can find me there. And for Hedvig, where I would say follow us on social media. That's probably where you'll see the most interesting content on our Instagram. And with the new brand, we just launched a new line of advertisements, so you can check those out both on Instagram and on YouTube. They came out really cool.
Great, sounds good. Okay, thank you for joining this week's episode of Homescreen. Thanks also to Alex for popping on the show. It was great to chat with him about products and how things are going over in Sweden. If you want to find out a little bit more about the product that underlies this show, that's Pulse, which is a platform we use to sort of find out what's going on in the market and to see kind of how they're doing the things that they do. Go to pulse.11fs.com to take a look at that product, to request a demo from one of our great sales guys. Also check us out on Twitter, so we're on @11fspulse, and then we can also get us on email, pulse@11fs.com. Tune in next week when we'll be taking a look in more detail at another product.